I thought a good topic to begin with this evening would be on soul contact. It seems to be probably this subject I've got more requests on teaching on the internet than possibly any other thing. Anybody here care to define what soul contact is? What would you call it?
Inner knowing.
What's that?
It's an inner knowing.
Okay. There's different types of contact people have. What are the different types of contact outside of normal communication? Normally we talk together and we communicate reasonably well, so we think. But then there's a lot of things not said that aren't communicated also. But what's the next step up in communication from the physical level?
Intuitive or emotional?
Yeah, let's write down the different ones in no particular order, and then we'll put them in order. Intuition. What else is kind of a supernatural concept?
ESP? Like that?
Yeah, let's put that down. What else?
Telepathy.
Okay, let's include that in the ESP.
So repeat the question again.
What are the different types of contact or communication that's beyond normal physical speech?
Did you say something like coincidences, or like a host of coincidences makes you late for an appointment, but had you been on time, you would have been in a horrific accident?
Yeah, that's definitely synchronicity is a word for that, and that's kind of a different subject though. That doesn't so much pertain to person on person. That's more like events that go on around you.
Do you mean like body language?
Are you fourth dimension visitation maybe? An actual ghost, angel?
There's one more that you haven't named yet. That is,
I would say soul contact is that it has nothing to do with the outside environment, because it's something that is inside, and it's inside. It's beyond reasoning, and it usually is irrational. It doesn't make sense as we know it, because you can't understand it from what the physical body's past has to understand it.
So have you ever got an impression that doesn't make sense, but then it made sense later on?
Yeah.
You had that happen?
Yeah, more and more.
Yeah, right. And you're right, it happens more and more the more you trust it. Okay? Yeah, gut feelings. Okay, let's call this instinct.
Are you talking about communication between people or between yourself and your soul?
Between you and anything else.
Okay,
Other person, masters, flying saucers, whatever.
like you're driving along, all of a sudden you get a message up, like you gotta get home, something's wrong at home, that kind of thing?
Impressions?
That's another word, impression.
You might get an impression that you ought to do something. It's rational since you know precisely what it is you're supposed to do. You might resist or not really want to do it because it goes against what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
What about emotions?
Impressions is usually not vocal, it's usually not a voice in your head, but you get an impression about something you're supposed to do or whatever, and sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, sometimes it's real, and sometimes it's based on other things. You just never know. But that's what we want to talk about here is a little bit is getting impressions and contact that we can really trust as being reliable, because we probably all met people that get impressions about things and they're not really right. All over the internet, all kinds of people are predicting doom about twice a year, and it never happens. And I'll make this. We do have a major international problem. No one will have predicted. That'll be a prediction you can pretty much bank on.
Is there any truth, do you think, if you get an impression, the more likely that it's real is proportional to how unpleasant or unlikely or how you don't want to do it? Is there any correlation there, do you think? I mean, if you got an impression to do something you kind of like to do it in line with what you want to do, you'll be less
Yeah, if you
likely.
get an impression that tells you to do something you really don't want to do, that's kind of a sign that you're just not making up, because when you make up your own impressions, it usually goes along with what you already believe in. You know? Like we've all seen some guy meet a really good-looking guy. Oh man, my soul's telling me that's the one for me. Of course. No, she's really a knockout, and so his personality is telling him that, and his soul is just playing along with him, I guess. But suppose your soul told you to marry somebody you didn't even like, you know. That's something you'd never come up with on your own, so maybe maybe you need to pay attention to that. Okay, so we have intuition, different forms of ESP, instinct. Of all these, let's start with the lowest. The lowest is instinct. Belongs to our animal nature, and animals are very instinctive. We've heard about the swallows return to Capistrano at the same time every year using instinct. Instinct is basically a computer program that's built in the makeup of living entities, and it produces with incredible accuracy things that we need to do as a species to preserve ourselves or to make ourselves more comfortable, or and so on. The animals have a lot of things built into them, and it's one of the reasons a lot of New Agers are actually claiming these days that animals are more intelligent than humans, because they're so instinctive. And that instinct kind of carries over to the more primitive peoples, the tribal type living people are very instinctual. Pygmies, natives down in South America and Africa rely very heavily on instinct because they're fairly new souls to the human kingdom. They don't have nearly the lifetimes under their belt as a lot of people in more civilized countries. And what happens when a person grows out of instinct and begins to develop his emotional nature, or his astral part of himself, he begins to lose his instinct. It appears that he loses it, but he doesn't really lose it. It's what is called, it goes below the threshold of consciousness, is the exact phrasing on that. His instinct goes, we all have this, all the instincts are built into us that are in all the animal kingdom. We have everything the animal kingdom has, and everything these tribes in Africa and South America and the Pygmies in Australia, all these instincts, great instincts that many people idolize these primitive peoples for having. I think in many ways they're superior to us. We all have them with us. In our past lives, we developed all of the instincts. But what we do as we evolve by the use of that key word that's in the book called attention. Making a decision and placing attention upon that decision. And what happens is when we have learned instinct and learned everything about it through our animal nature, then we want to pass on and develop our emotional nature. We shift our attention from instinct to the astral nature, and when we shift our attention, because our attention is off of it, everything having to do with instinct goes below the threshold of consciousness. Now it's still there, just like everything you learn in the 5th grade is recorded in your computer brain. You can go back with a regression and recover a lesson your teacher gave you 20 years ago. Word for word. It's all still there in your computer brain. But it's below the threshold of your consciousness because your attention isn't on it. If you would have listened to that teacher speak to you 20 years ago and put attention on those phrases for the whole 20 years, you would still have that in your consciousness. But because you did not do that, it wasn't important enough to keep your attention on, it goes below the threshold of consciousness, but it hasn't disappeared. Everything you ever learned in your life is still there. Every instinct you've ever developed, and within you, like I say, is all the instincts that the animal kingdom has ever had, that the primitive man has ever had. It's all within you and can be retrieved anytime that you put attention on it. Anytime it's needed, it can be brought back. But right now, as a person moves to develop his astral nature, he puts his attention on developing the feeling side of himself. And when he does that, all the instincts go below the threshold of consciousness. And people think, boy, I'm just not very instinctual anymore. I don't have any instinct. Well, he has it, but he doesn't have use for it right now. And because he doesn't have use for it right now, because he's developing something else. And so we develop our astral nature, and most of mankind right now, close to 90% of them are very strongly centered in the astral desire, emotional nature. That's where most of mankind are. This has quite a number of divisions to it, but one of the first contacts that supernatural contacts you have as the astral nature is developed is we develop a certain amount of ESP, we do get impressions, and through our astral nature. But the trouble with the astral body is the astral body is a reflector. And when you look in a mirror, do you see yourself as you really are, or do you see something else? What do you see? What kind of image do you see in the mirror? It's reversed, right? Yeah, you don't see yourself as you are when you look in the mirror. You're just reversed. And the astral is like, it takes the impressions from the soul and it reverses everything. And so it's, when we're in the astral emotional consciousness, it's very difficult to get to the truth because everything is reversed for us. You ever see two very emotional people argue with each other? I mean, you ever see them reach agreement? Or if you watch a person, I watch a lot of these arguments they have on TV, like the crossfire type stuff. And oftentimes you'll have a person who's very mental, he's arguing from a very logical point of view. But he's arguing with a guy that's very astral, and he's arguing from entirely his feeling side. And I can see this guy's got everything totally upside down. And this guy will maybe quote some survey. And the survey is pretty black and white, the poll or whatever. And this guy, that poll means nothing to him, because he feels the truth is a certain way. And so he says, that poll doesn't mean anything. That's done by a bunch of idiots, And so he goes on. And the facts, nothing means anything to this guy. The only thing that means anything to this guy is what he feels to be true, and he argues from that point of view. Now, this guy who's centered in the mind is really frustrated. Because there he's presenting logic and polls and data and stuff like that, like Spock on Star Trek. This guy's like Bones on Star Trek, He says, he's dead, Jim! Okay. Spock, you don't care that the guy's dead. The guy's dead, Spock. Spock says, well, yes, he's dead. Nothing we can do about that. You have no feelings, Spock, So, anyway, that's one thing I like about Star Trek is Star Trek is so representative, the original Star Trek, none of the rest of them really did this, but the original one was so representative of the different stages of evolution. The lowest were like the Klingons, pretty much, they were an instinctual animal type man. And next was Bones, He was very astral, emotional, got upset over everything, always chewing Spock out, even though Spock was just being logical. And Spock was very emotional. I mean, very logical. Just detached from emotions almost completely. And then there was Kirk, and Kirk was a totally different brand of guy. How was he different from the other two?
His emotions were ruled by the moment.
His emotions were ruled by his mind, but he went beyond the mind.
He was intuitive.
Right, he was intuitive. And at one time, it kind of amazed me what he said on one of the episodes. He said, one time he was presenting a plan to Spock and Bones, and Spock says to him, "Yes, Jim, but your plan is not logical." And Captain Kirk says to him, "Let me tell you something, Bones." He says, "When you go through schooling to be a Starfleet commander," he says, "one thing they look for is intuition. So the one thing that a person in my position has to have in order to be a captain of a ship like this, he has to be able to make decisions based on intuition." He says, "Now what I'm telling you, the solution I'm presenting you, I know does not seem logical. But let me tell you this, that when it's all over, and we have the bad guys in hand and everything, and the solution is done," he says, "you will see that it's very logical when it's all over." Spock goes, "What you're saying is not logical, but because we have been through this a number of times, and in the end, what you have said always seems to work, even though it's not logical. It is logical to follow you, so I will support you." And so Spock supporting, they fought the bad guys, whatever it was, they prevailed, and in the end, Spock had to admit, I guess it was logical after all. You know, if it worked, I guess it's logical. So those three divisions on Star Trek I've always loved because it represents kind of the three divisions of humanity. So Bones here kind of represents the astral nature. He's very emotional, and he makes his decisions based on emotion. If it's an emotional decision, and if it's logical to go against something where emotionally it seems right, Spock will go on the emotional decision, or Bones will, and Spock will go on the mental decision.